Hi, I'm Mike Johnston. I'm the Vice President of the Northwest Screenwriters Guild, someone absolutely no one wants to listen to. So let me introduce our very special guest tonight so he can talk, the co-host of the podcast Scriptnotes, Mr. John August. Welcome, sir.
Hello, it's really nice to be here.
Great.
I usually say hello and welcome. That's my default greeting on Scriptnotes, but it's nice to see a bunch of either faces or at least names in boxes here for this. Mike, Linnell, Scott, thank you so much for having me here at the Northwest Screenwriters Guild. Mike, tell me about your organization because I looked at the website, but I'm a little confused in terms of sort of. I think of the Northwest as Portland and Seattle, but tell me what your focus is.
You know, we have a good concentration of people in the Seattle area, but we have members far and wide. We have people who show up from Israel, from South Africa. Since we're on Zoom, we do weekly meetings that do scene analysis. We do monthly meetings that read the entire screenplay, so it gets more into story. So we have people from all over.
I think what you're setting up to do here is a lot of sort of why I sort of got involved in answering questions about screenwriting. Is I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, was a journalism major in Iowa, and it wasn't until I was in college that I actually found out there was such a thing as screenwriting. So everyone on this Zoom is ahead of where I was at. And when I was sort of first finding out that there was such a thing called screenwriting, the only opportunity I had to read scripts was like books would sometimes publish the screenplay that went with a movie. So the first thing I read was Steven Soderbergh had a script for Sex, Lies, and Videotape along with a production diary. And I was able to sort of read through that and see like, oh my gosh, this is everything they're saying in the movie. Like I was watching the videotape, everything they're saying in the movie is like written down there on paper beforehand. And it seems so obvious because we've all grown up reading plays in high school. And so of course a movie is like a play, but with more stuff in it. But I just didn't know it until I actually saw it and read it for the first time. So in discovering that there was such a thing as a screenplay and someone had to write that screenplay, I was like, that's a job I think I want to do. And so I went to the library because this is pre-internet and sort of read as much as I could. I found out there were film programs. I went to a summer program at Stanford where I learned how to shoot the basics of shooting film and a little bit about storytelling, cinematic storytelling. And then I applied to and got into USC for film school. And that's where for grad school, I did a 2-year producing program. And that's where I read 1,000 scripts and really got to understand what screenwriting was and sort of how it worked. But I always remembered what it was like not to know these things. And so as the internet came up, IMDb asked me to write a weekly column about screenwriting. So I was answering listener questions about screenwriting, reader questions about screenwriting. I started my own blog where I answered more of those questions and sort of talked about what it was I was doing. And then almost 15 years ago, I started a podcast with Craig Mazin about screenwriting, and that was Scriptnotes. And our imagined listener is the person who, maybe they're working in the industry, but maybe they're just, they're the kid I was in Iowa who wants to know about screenwriting and wants to have good information about it. And since there weren't other online communities for it, we were just trying to provide that answer for people with those questions and really talk about what the experience was like. And so for 15 years, we had a weekly podcast about it, talking everything from the craft to the business. And now finally, we have a book that comes out December 2nd, the Scriptnotes book, which is a hardcover that is sort of all the topics that we sort of get into on the podcast week after week. And it's a chance to, someone asks us a question, we can't point them to like, go listen to episode 208, but we can say like, it's here in the book. And so it's a chance to sort of answer some of those questions a little more definitively and sort of share what we've learned. So that's the instinct behind Scriptnotes, the book, the podcast, and sort of why I like to talk to people online about what screenwriting is like.
Absolutely. I stopped screenwriting because the feedback I was getting, it was so all these rules. And then I discovered your podcast and I'm like, these guys get it. And I went back, it's been a whole summer. I went back to the earliest episode I could get. And so I can easily say that I have listened to every single one of your podcasts.
Holy cow. That's
highly
incredible.
recommend.
Yeah. So 714 or so episodes of Scriptnotes to listen to, plus some bonus segments along the way.
Yeah.
Mike, it's good you talk about like the rules of screenwriting, because one of the things when we set out to write a screenwriting book is that every book of screenwriting is basically here are the rules and follow these rules and you will write a good screenplay. And so we felt like we had to start with an introductory chapter that was just like, here are the rules of screenwriting. And so um, we came down to 20 of them. I'll just read you the 20 and then I'll tell you like why they're all bullshit. But these are the kind of rules you're going to see all the time. Your script must be 120 pages or fewer, 12-point career only. The inciting incident must happen by page 15. The first act break must be by page 30. The midpoint is really important. The second act break must be on page 90. No scene can be longer than 3 pages. You can only use day or night in scene headings. Never use cut to. It's unnecessary filler. No camera directions unless you're also the director. Don't use we see or we hear. Use uppercase only for sound effects and character introductions. No bold, italics, or asterisks. No punctuation in parentheticals. Don't make asides to the reader in action description. If it can't be seen or heard, cut it. Don't use the words is or walks. Don't use passive voice. No adverbs ending in ly. No ing verbs. No voiceover. So those are the 20. And those are the kinds of things that we kept sort of being, forced at us as we were sort of starting off as screenwriters. These were like the shibboleths, like don't do these things. And the truth is, in reading good screenplays, you will find all these things in abundance, and you will find a bunch of different ways and styles that writers write. And there's conventions, but there really aren't rules to screenwriting. There's just a way of conjuring the experience of watching a movie just with the words on a page. And that's all screenwriting is. But it's a lot. And that's why it's been 15 years of podcasting and a book.
Absolutely. So the book isn't out now. It's on December. It drops on December 2nd.
December 2nd. So it's available for pre-order now, but comes out a week from tomorrow.
Okay. So where could we pre-order it?
Absolutely everywhere. So go to scriptnotesbook.com and you'll see links to things, but obviously it's on Amazon. It's in your local bookstore. It's wherever you get books, it's there.
Fantastic. So I understand the book was put together from transcripts from the podcast.
Yeah.
When you were revisiting these transcripts, was there something that surprised you in there?
We've had transcripts of the podcast basically from the beginning, largely for accessibility. We have a lot of deaf listeners and they're not hearing the podcast, they're reading the podcast. And so it's always important for us to have really accurate, transcripts of every episode. And they've always been up for free on the website. And what's been good over the years is I'll wonder like, hey, did we ever talk about this thing? And I can just Google it and see like, oh yeah, we did. We talked about it in episode 206. And that's been really useful. I kind of naively thought like, well, we have all the transcripts. We'll just pull all the transcripts together and edit them down into a book. And it just didn't work. It was impossible to do that. And so two people sort of took the lead on that. Drew Marquardt and Chris Sant, who both worked for me and worked for the podcast, they sort of took the charge of saying, okay, what are the big basic topics? And we sort of had discussions and agreements and whiteboards about what the topics were. And they had to go through the transcripts and figure out like, what did we say about these things, copy and paste them into a big document, and then do a first pass of like trying to get it down into kind of a coherent voice. So it's not a conversation. It's actually like one collective voice for the two of us. That ended up having to be a lot more work on sort of my side in terms of just going through, cleaning it up and actually making it feel like one person is talking the whole time. So it took a long time. It was a much, much harder than I thought it would be, but I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Oh, I'm sure.
The other thing, which is really important for us for the book, is that we have all the craft and business chapters, but in between them, we have interview chapters with some of the amazing guests who've come on the show. And so they're sort of in conversation with like the chapter that just came before it. So we have Christopher Nolan and Greta Gerwig and Loren Scafaria and other amazing writers who've come in to talk to us about their process and sort of how they approach writing. Because Craig and I have different opinions on some things, but it's nice to have 30 other different opinions on how stuff actually works, and to see that it's not all your favorite writers are just working really, really hard. There's talent. There's some people are especially gifted in some areas, but mostly they're working really hard, and it's kind of a struggle for everybody.
Of all the guests that you have in there, writers, directors. Who would you say was the best on theme?
On theme. Um, so I'm going to define theme loosely as like the underlying thing about a movie, what a movie is really about, that is not about the plot. And so, what is it really? What is the question, the dramatic question that it's trying to answer? Listen, Christopher Nolan was a fantasy guest. We were excited to have him on board, have him coming onto the podcast. But it was really interesting seeing his approach to writing something like Oppenheimer, which is basically he had to do just a lot of deep digging to figure out what did the movie mean to him? What was it about the Oppenheimer's life that was so fascinating that he could sort of key into, that to keep coming back to? And so for him, it was, you know, the so sometimes really the imagery of coming back to that we sort of keep coming back to in the movie in terms of his discovery process that got us back into it. Greta Gerwig talking about Lady Bird and sort of like um, what it meant to be a young woman who was both rebelling and sort of also finding her place. And in Little Women, sort of how she approached the this book that she knew so deeply and so intimately, but she knew she needed to explore it differently on screen. Those are the kind of conversations that sort of were so exciting to me to talk through. So yes, on theme, because you kind of need to know what the movie is really about before you start writing it. But sometimes it's also a discovery process that you write a draft and then you read it and other people read it and they realize like, oh, I thought it was about this, but it's actually about that. And that becomes the sort of unifying goal for the next draft.
Thank you. I'm a theme guy.
Yeah.
Northwest Guild knows I'm the guy who's constantly harping on themes. So
Yeah.
thank you for answering that. Was there a section that you kind of wish you had more pages on structure, outlining, rewriting? What was there a section you really wanted to expand?
Yeah. So the initial draft of the book was 600 pages and we were committed to 300 pages. So we bargained our way up to 333. But one of the chapters that didn't make the cut was called Getting Stuff Written. And it was really sort of about the the process and procrastination and all the psychology of sort of what it takes to actually get words on the paper. And that's what I'm proud about with the chapter is that we were able to sort of balance that. Sometimes you need tough love and sometimes you need self-care. And we sort of talk you through what is the balance and sort of how are you productive but not self-destructive? How are you finding ways to make writing rewarding and not just an absolute exhausting chore? And so that's a chapter I'm really happy with. So we end up now have that as a bonus chapter. So if you pre-order the book, we send you that bonus chapter. You send us your receipt and we send out that bonus chapter. So if you want to pre-order the book, it's scriptnotesbook.com. When you get that receipt, just send it through to Drew, who is ask@johnalex.com, and we send you the bonus chapter just as a special thank you for ordering the book.
Well, thank you. Uh, when you went through this whole process, was did you find your opinions maybe evolved over time, and what might those be?
I think, our opinions over the 15 years of listening to the podcast, they have some stuff has progressed. Like an example would be, I would think 15 years ago, I kind of believed in a meritocracy more than I do now. That I believe that like if you're a really good writer, it will work out and people will notice you and things will happen. I've just seen so often really great writers who the dots just don't connect. And I think I'm much more aware that there's other factors at play there, and some variables you can predict and some variables you can't predict. So that's an example of like how I've evolved over time. I think that's only because of talking with a bunch of other writers and honestly a bunch of listeners who are facing real challenges. I also think I had a very US bias in terms of screenwriting. And I think I'm much more aware of the fact of if I'm answering a question that the question might pertain to the US film and TV industry, but other industries just work a lot differently. So even though the fundamentals of craft are going to be universal across all experiences, any answer I'm giving about the business itself is very going to be US based because that's just the world I know. And I also know very much a kind of a Hollywood world. I've done a lot of work with Sundance Institute and some other independent films, but I'm always surprised about sort of really hometown filmmaking that sometimes can be great, and it's just outside of my wheelhouse. So I think I'm much more aware of the stuff I don't know now, and I'm um, very very capable of saying, but I don't know, and there's other good answers out there.
Sure. So speaking of the business,
Yeah.
um, a lot of people assume I write a great script, I get an agent, and then people pay me to write scripts for them.
Mhm.
What's the reality of what you do as a successful professional screenwriter? What's your day like? What's the stuff you're doing besides screenwriting? I mean, get to that. How much hustle do you need to be a screenwriter?
I think that's a great day to be asking that question because the episode we just put out today is by the two writers of K-pop Demon Hunters, who are sort of recent college graduates. They're sort of like the prototype of just like, I came out of college with a film degree and I hustled really hard and I made it, and now I'm still working. And so it's good if you're, someone who's in that cohort. Great lessons in terms of just like they made the most of their ramen days where like they were broke and they just knew they were broke, and that's okay. And they were scrambling. They were saying yes to everything they possibly could. They just worked and worked and worked and worked. And they're a great example of that kind of very classic story, which is that eventually people start passing around your scripts without you knowing they're passing them around, and suddenly the heat just builds, and it's great. They made a lot of opportunities for themselves, and they took advantage of it. But that's not universal. And if there's people who are entering into the business, switching from a different career, they're coming in later, they're doing different things, and in those situations, uh, there's no one sort of classic way that it happens. I was talking to a guy at the Austin Film Festival who realized that he got tired of trying to pitch on things. It's like, I'm just going to write everything as a spec and I'm going to just sell specs. And so he sold 3 comedy specs over the course of 18 months and sort of got started and sort of got things going. So that does still happen. It's just, I think my frustration has always been, even before I started the podcast, is there's sort of a lottery ticket mentality sometimes to screenwriting. It's like, I'm going to write this thing and I'm going to pay, they're going to buy it for $1 million, and then I'll be set, and then I'll be working constantly. And that's just not the experience. That it's amazing if you have a first sale, but more importantly is that you write something that people want to hire you to write other things, because that's sustainable way that sort of keep going in this business for most writers.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Austin, the Guild, Northwest Screenwriters Guild, was really well represented there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we had Toby Iverson Halliday. She won the pitch competition.
That's great.
We had a finalist, couple semifinalists. I don't know, 8, 10 second rounders. So we were well represented. But you also mentioned pitches. I'm hearing and reading more pitches are getting bought. Is that something that entry level people can take advantage of, or is that really for established writers?
I think it can happen across the gamut. And listen, I think pitches are a good bellwether that there's the business is picking up some, which is great, and that people are excited to sort of develop new stuff and sort of get things going. There are ideas that are very pitchable. There are ideas that like, well, you can sort of see like, oh, I get why that is a movie. I can see what the trailer would be for that. I can understand what the concept is there. And if you're writing a thing that's like that, then being able to pitch it is really important. Is it a little tougher to sort of get in the door to do that pitch if no one knows who the hell you are? Yes. And yet every day there's examples of people who do that. So that pitch might get you in to meet with a manager or to meet with other people. But again, they're excited to hear the idea, but they're only excited if the idea is matched with samples that they're excited to read. And so very few of these pitches are selling from like people no one knows who they didn't also read a really great screenplay. So it ultimately comes down to that. Again, this episode that just dropped with the K-pop Demon Hunters writers, they had a good funny script, and with that good funny script, they could get in and sort of pitch on K-pop Demon Hunters. They weren't just taking a random person off the street and hoping that they could do it.
Sure. So you gave me a piece of advice once.
Oh, great.
That really stuck with me. I was hoping you could expand upon it. Getting notes is just part of the
Yeah.
business. You told me when I asked about getting notes, you said everybody has an agenda.
Yeah.
Could you expand on that?
Absolutely. And there's actually a whole chapter, but we did expand on it in the book called Notes on Notes. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that's just like the Mike Johnston, like perfect pitch for that. Um, Whenever you get a note about a script, there is something. Keep in mind that the note has an intention behind it. There's something that was not working for the reader, and they wanted to let you know about it. And so honor that. That's great. It's good that they're giving you the note. You don't take the note, hear that they had an issue, don't take their solution as the solution. If something isn't working for them, your job is to figure out what it actually is. And so sometimes they're saying, oh, it's this thing on page 15, but is it really about the thing on page 15, or is it something that actually happened on page 12 that was knocking them off the track? Your job is to sort of to figure out what that is. And so thank them for the note, and then see if you can explore and figure out what's actually really happening there behind the note. Some notes you just disagree with, or sometimes the person is not reading the same movie that you're intending to make. And so you can have a good conversation where you sort of can figure out what movie it is that they think they want to make. But if they're not the decision maker, if they're not the person who's like writing the check, you don't have to do their note. If you get a consistent note, though, from several people, it's especially worth paying attention to, because something is not clicking right about the script. They're not seeing the same movie that you're seeing. And that's a good sign to dig in and figure out, is there a movie that matches their expectation that also meets what you are setting out to do?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it comes out as feedback. There's three different pieces of feedback, and it's all the same underlying problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
They don't know what it is, but they see the effect it's having on your story.
Yeah, and especially if you get notes like, I got a little bored here, I got kind of lost, I didn't know what I was doing here, I found this repetitive. Those are signs that something before that was just not working right. You didn't click and engage with them right, because you find that viewers and listeners and readers will forgive you a lot if they're engaged and curious. But if you lose that engagement and that curiosity, they may keep flipping pages, but they're not really reading it.
Sure. So on the craft itself,
Yeah.
you think about earlier in your career, Go, Big Fish, Charlie Chocolate Factory. I mean, you worked on a lot of stuff for a very long time. What are some lessons you wish you had learned earlier in your career?
This is probably not as much a craft thing as a business thing, but um, I'm really happy with the movies I've gotten made. Love them to death. But there are a lot of movies that I did just as much work on that didn't get made. And some of the frustration I feel is that there's a whole bunch of my work and the movies I wrote in my head that don't exist out there. And I think some of that is my own fault, because I made some bad choices. And I think I chased and pursued some projects that were interesting, but weren't really my passion. They were Sometimes they were paydays, but sometimes they were like a chance to sort of prove myself in certain ways. And I think I wish I would have spent a little more time focusing on writing the things that I could do myself, that I could direct myself, that were very specific and that only I could do. Because I think in some cases, I was writing movies that lots of people could have done, and I was happy to do it, but it wasn't my calling in life to do it. And so, like, Big Fish was a movie that I feel like kind of only I could have done. It was very specific to my experience. I got to do the Broadway musical version of Big Fish, which is, again, very true to my experience and took 15 years of my life. It was a lot, but I don't regret that. But there's other small projects along the way, including some that didn't get made, that were not the best use of my words and my time and my attention. And so that's a thing as a professional writer, but even as someone on the Zoom who's an aspiring writer, who's aspiring to become a professional writer, really think about what movie you most want to see exist in the world. And that's the one you should be focusing your time and your attention on, not just the one you think like, well, I could sell it maybe. It's not going to be good for you.
I have a couple of those. I could describe your writing style because I've read your screenplays.
Yeah.
It's, just clean, Hemingway-esque, short, muscular sentences, but voice.
Yeah.
How would you describe your voice? I think a lot of writers struggle with what a voice is. So how would you describe yours?
It's friendly. It's it's not crazy smart and intellectual. It is. I want it to feel like I'm sitting right next to you in the theater watching it on a screen. That's what I want it to feel like. And so if I say we hear and we see and we hear, that's because I'm right there with you, and this is what we're watching together. And so that we're on this ride together. I'm never going to refer to the second person. I'm not going to say you see this, but we do this thing as an audience together. We see and feel this thing. Um, it's a it's warm. It's not especially cold and clinical. Uh, and I can go back to scripts I wrote 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and I will have forgotten every single thing about it, but it will still read like me. And that's essentially, you do develop a voice at a certain point, and there's a fingerprint to it, and it does feel like me. So the thing I was writing this afternoon versus 15 years ago, they're very similar in terms of the words I'm choosing and sort of what it looks like on the page. It's just, you develop a style.
Yeah. In reading a bunch of scripts, with our organization, you can see people who have a voice. It
Yeah.
jumps off the page. And
We should say, if you want to read any of my stuff, at my website, johnaugust.com, there's a library there. And so basically everything I've written, all the scripts I've written are there. So if you're curious to read Big Fish or Charlie and Chocolate Factory or any of those things, that's there.
So are you an outliner or right by the seat of your pants kind of guy?
Classically, I'm more of a pantser. I'm more sort of figuring stuff out as I go and sort of feeling my way through it. I do have a sense of what the overall shape of the story is, but I will write whatever scene is appealing to me right in the day. And so I'll write out a sequence. I'll do all that kind of stuff. Increasingly, I've been doing stuff where I've had to turn in an outline first, sometimes in animation or other projects.
Mhm.
And I kind of resented it, but it is really handy when you can say like, oh, the story problems are solved, and now it's just about the scene work. So I do appreciate that. This project I'm working on right now, I turned in a 45-page outline, and so at that level, you really do know the story. There's no mysteries, and it was a required step for this project, but it was really nice to be able to have conversations with the studio, and they knew exactly what movie I was writing. And so when I delivered them that movie, they weren't surprised, they weren't shocked. It was just a better version of what they had in the outline, and that felt good.
Quick reminder to drop your questions into the chat. We'll be getting that real quick. Any differences between you've done original
Mm-hmm.
features, adaptations, big budget films? Is there crossovers or certain tips that you could give us on working with those different types of stories?
I do a lot of adaptations, and crucially, an adaptation, it's the idea is coming from someplace else, but it has to be a movie first and foremost. And so you really have to look at like what does this story want to look like on a screen, and that can mean radical transformation of the underlying narrative to make it fit on in that 2 hour block, and with sort of the just what an audience approaches with expectation for a movie. So Big Fish is a collection of tiny little short stories. The book is very different from the movie, and yet it tracks, it makes sense. Charlie and Chocolate Factory has kind of every single word I could keep from the original book, and get onto the big screen is there, but it's actually structured a lot differently. And in the movie version of it, Charlie is the antagonist and Willy Wonka is the protagonist. Willy Wonka is the character who changes throughout the course of it because they needed somebody to actually have an arc over the course of the movie. And Charlie Bucket starts the movie as a really good kid and ends as a really good kid. And so I needed to have him be the one who sort of created the change and created the nervous breakdown that was happening for Willy Wonka. So it's incredibly close to the book and yet also incredibly different in terms of the character and dynamics you're seeing there in the story. So it really depends on the needs of what it is. The movies I'm writing as originals, listen, like that, I'm writing an original right now, and it's great. It's liberating. It's sometimes a little scary not to have the backstop of the material you're adapting.
Sure. So, what's a piece of advice that you just keep giving writers again and again and again, they keep ignoring?
Um, I sort of alluded to it first, which is basically write the movie you would pay money to see. And I said the pay money to see is, I think, important because it distinguishes between commercial, like big C commercial, like, oh, everyone's going to go see that movie, but what's the movie that you actually would want to see? If you love low budget grisly horror, you should write that, because that's a movie that you wish you could see, that you'd actually pay your money to see. And by the same token, like, don't write a football movie if you don't like football movies like that. And so often I see people who have spent a year of their life writing movies like, you would never go see this. And there have been a couple times in my life where I've come in and done like a couple weeks on movies like, I'm never going to see this movie. Like, it's just not my movie at all. But as a craftsman, I was just coming in to help them out. I think most of the movies I've worked on are movies that I'm genuinely excited to plunk down my money on a Friday night to go see. And that is an important distinction.
Good advice. So, after all these years, what do you love about screenwriting?
I love the adventure. I love just the sort of like, the chance to sort of just build out a whole new space in a world I've never seen before. I'm very much a writer who, uh, so my experience of writing is I close my eyes, I put myself in the scene, I see everything, I hear everything, I sort of like let it loop through, and then I quickly scribble down what I saw, and then go back through and do a clean version. I've always been just very good at sort of just imagining myself in a place, and I love going to that place and imagining it. There's a series I'm hoping to do next, and if it happens, the good part, the bad part is like I'll get to be in a place for years at a time writing those episodes, and that's really exciting to me. It's a little terrifying, but exciting to me to get that chance to sort of stay in a place and watch it grow and develop and change and interact with the realities of production.
Fantastic. Good answer. So, you mind if we take a few questions?
Sure, let's go for it.
Liddell, you still with us?
I'm still with you. We have a number of questions, but this one has stood out to me, and we're going till 7:30. So if we
Great.
don't get to someone's question, we're sorry, but reach out to the Northwest Screenwriters Guild and we can help you. This is from Luke Rankin. He says, "We've talked to good routines, but what bad habits were you
Mm.
able to kick that helped you become a better writer?"
It's a great question, and I'm going to uh, fall back on a thing I've said other times before. So Google it, and I've probably said it before. But I used to have bad habits, and then I decided to just label them habits and not um, define them as good or bad. They're just the ways that I work. And so as I recognize myself falling into a less productive habit, that's just me. I'm wasting times in the ways I'm wasting times, or I'm doing that thing again, and I'm not as harsh on myself when I see myself doing it. Bad habits are the classic procrastination, uh, or doing the New York Times crossword puzzle when I know I should really start first, and if I don't get stuff, if I don't get work done in the morning, uh, I'm not going to get as much work done over the course of the day. If I don't start that kind of first sprint, which is that sort of first hour of really concentrated work, I'm not going to get as much done in the course of the day. But also, stuff will eventually get done, and that's okay too. Um, I can ruminate too much. I can sort of fixate too much on stupid things, but that's also a part of my brain that's involved with my imagination. So that's also the muscle I use for writing dialogue. So it, I have bad habits, but I just choose not to label them as bad anymore.
Good choice. Okay, Connor O'Farrell says, "What matters to you more when you write, the process of writing or the prospect of the finished script? Is it the journey or the destination that drives you?"
Um, Honestly, it's the destination. I love having a finished thing. I love reading through something that I really like the outcome of it. Um, the getting there sometimes is bloody and messy along the way. There's moments where you enter what we call flow, where it's just like, oh my god, it's natural and it's easy, and you just sort of lose time. You're like, wow, this is going so great. And I think it's dangerous to, it can be addictive, and you can sort of start to kind of chase flow in a way that is unhelpful. Because if you actually go back and look at artists' best work, it didn't always come while they were in their flow states, when everything was good and easy. Some of their best work came when they actually were sort of grumpy and resentful. And as long as you're getting stuff done, that's what really sort of matters most. But getting stuff done and finishing things, oh, I love it to death.
Okay, Hanif Bahati asks, how do you think that Hollywood has changed in terms of non-Hollywood writers, the talent outside of America or Hollywood?
So there have always been international writers who've worked in the Hollywood system, and so obviously a great number of British writers and Australian writers as well, who are writing in English but writing sort of from overseas, or who sometimes they come here. I have friends, Kelly Marcel, who's a terrific writer who came from the UK and but made her career really in the US. I think what's changed most over the course of 15 years is that with the rise of international streamers, there's a lot more local language production that's happening with what are approximating Hollywood budgets and series, but there've always been great features made overseas. And that's giving exposure to a lot of international writing that US audiences would never have seen before. So the globalization on that front is terrific in terms of the ability for non-English language media in particular to be consumed as primary media in the US is a great change.
Claire June asks, you worked hard to be an in-demand industry insider. What
Mhm.
draws you to a project to say yes or to say no?
Great question. I think there's the underlying material itself. Like, is this is it again? The first question is it a movie I actually pay money to see? Um, is it something I feel like I could do and that I could do well? Are there good, interesting people associated with it? And so, if there are people I've always wanted to work with, fantastic. Or I have worked with before, great. But I will also call around and find people who worked with them before and get the download. Like, are they an asshole? Because there's life is too short to be working with a bunch of assholes sometimes. And sometimes it's worth it, but most times it's not worth it. So those are the things. I'm also really mindful of the opportunity costs. And as I said before, I think I was over parts of my career, I've been chasing a little too much and doing the thing that I feel like I should be doing rather than the thing I really want to be doing. And so I will ask myself, am I just chasing? Is this actually a thing I really do want to do?
Here's a question from Joe King about the Prince of Persia.
Yeah.
On uh you're on IMDb page or in your library on your site, he doesn't see it.
Yeah.
He wants to know, there were things he admires about that script. Is there a version you wrote that could be available?
I never read Prince of Persia. So I was an executive producer on Prince of Persia. Jordan Mechner wrote it. And so Jordan Mechner created the original game of Prince of Persia. We got partnered up through a friend, and he said, like, I really wanted to do a movie of Prince of Persia. He and I went around town over the course of 2 days. We pitched it to every place. Disney bought it for Jerry Bruckheimer. Jordan wrote in a great, great script. It got sort of Hollywood studioed a bit. And so I think the movie that Jordan wrote was better than the movie that came out, but I'm happy that some people like the original movie, but I never wrote it. And it was a good lesson for me in that producing a movie seems like, well, it's easier than writing a movie, but it's also very frustrating as a writer because I love Jordan to death. And yet, as we were going through the draft, I kept wanting to just like fix things myself rather than sort of suggest how you could fix things. I likened it to being an airline pilot and you're in the cockpit, but you're not allowed to touch the controls. It was a little bit frustrating on that front. So that's a reason why I've not done a lot of other producing of other people's stuff over the years. Is that I learned like I'm not a great creative roommate when it comes to um, screenwriting.
Okay. Combining a couple questions, I'll just paraphrase. Does age matter? If you are, say, over 50 or 60, does that make you obsolete?
It doesn't make you obsolete, but I think age does matter. And age matters to the degree that you have different possibilities at different moments in your life. And so if you are just graduating from undergrad and you can live on very little money and eat your ramen and scramble and do things, you're going to approach the start of your screenwriting career differently than if you are, a parent with two young kids. You're going to just make different choices, and that's understandable and right. Both ways can work, but I think it's naive to assume that everyone's going to have the same opportunities at every moment in their career. Um, Screenwriting is about writing a screenplay that people can then use as the basis for making a movie, but it's also about being able to sit across from somebody and convince them that you really can deliver what they need in order to shoot that movie. There's a large psychological component, a social component to it, which is important. A 22-year-old is going to have a harder time doing that than a 30-year-old sometimes, because it's just hard to get people to trust you a little bit. And if you are a person who's not living in Los Angeles, it can be harder still to sort of do that stuff. So the logistics and age and things like that do matter, but it's not because there's like some hard, bright line that you can't cross. It's just the nature of physically doing the work with other people is a factor.
Here's a sort of a loaded question from Jermaine Reed. For writers building original films instead of IP,
Mhm.
what's the smartest way to make the script undeniable on the page?
Undeniable on the page. So if you're writing an original thing and it's going to be a calling card movie, a thing I would strongly encourage you to do is see if there's a way that the main character, the protagonist, can read as a reflection of you. It can read as a reflection of your own experience. So as you're picking through all the things you could possibly write, the thing that most speaks to someone read this script and then they met you, like, well, of course, Jamel is the person who wrote this script. Like, it makes so much sense. And because they talk to you about like, oh, where did you come from? Where did this, like, oh, I see exactly why you and only you could have written this script. And that is incredibly useful and helpful, because not only do they like the script, but they get a sense of who you are as a person. And they can be thinking about like, well, even if I don't do this script, how can I get this very talented writer to write something else for me? So that's incredibly useful. And so, listen, you want to sell that script, but it's mostly going to be a sample. And if that sample is not just of your writing talent, but your voice, your personality, like who you are, that is incredibly helpful. So that undeniability is not just that it's commercially viable, but that like, oh, I get why only he or she could have written the script.
Here's one on what's something in younger writers that you're really excited to see in the future? Is it style or is it theme, something that Gen X and Millennial aren't quite doing?
Um, Listen, the theme is a hard one. It's too esoteric, but style and voice. You want, uh, if I'm writing a script, I want to have a sense like, oh, the characters are speaking with interesting voices, but also the storytelling style on the page is engaging. If I keep flipping pages and I'm excited to see what happens next, that is a great read, and that is a person I want to meet. And it's really of any age. But if I was looking for somebody who was specifically was writing for younger characters, writing for people currently in their teens and 20s, that's the kind of thing I'd look for on the page.
You personally have a goal of how many pages you for yourself you write a day?
3 pages is great. 3 pages is about an hour or two of writing a day, and so that seems like, oh, that's not actually a lot, but it's diminishing returns after 2 hours of actual writing per day. Like, just like the amount that you actually get done sort of tends to decrease. There are days where you will just crank through 20 pages, and they're actually like a pretty good 20 pages. But if you start to think like, well, that's the normal, you are going to burn yourself out. And so in the bonus chapter we put out with getting stuff written, we really sort of dive into that. It's just basically find whatever is the sustainable amount of writing that you can get done in a day and aim for that. And don't beat yourself up if you're not hitting that, because otherwise you're going to start resenting writing, which is not the goal here. When I was writing, I've written some books. I've written three. I have a 3-book series called Arlo Finch, which is middle grade, sort of Harry Potter age. And for those, I had to write 1,000 words a day, because I recognized that if I wasn't hitting that target, you're just never going to finish the book. And so 1,000 words seems like a lot, but when you actually like look at the screen, it's like it's a scroll, like it's only like that long. It's like it's a frustratingly small amount of actual page count, but it gets the job done.
Personally, I wrote a novel and did 8 pages a day,
Great.
and it was exhausting. But I
It
got to
is
tell you,
exhausting. Yeah. Yeah.
it was tough. You think only 8 pages, but it was exhausting.
Yeah.
This is an interesting question from Hannah Lehman. She says, "What is the best time of the year to go out with a script realistically?" meaning taking into account festivals and holidays. When's the best time to present your script?
Um, I am not an agent or manager, and they would have much more experience with this. I would say back to school feels right. September feels right. Your instinct is correct that like the holidays are just like this is a terrible time of year for kind of everything. Um, January after Sundance can be good for a while. I think there's a fear of like the film festivals and stuff like that, overwhelming stuff, but like the people who are reading scripts coming in aren't quite the same audience for that. Um, so there's gonna be some time in the spring. Stuff can happen in the summer. It's just that people are gone more in the summer. It's just tough. And so I think that's why you see so many things happening in the fall. But stuff does scripts sell every week of the year. It's just there's stuff there's times you tend to avoid just because you know fewer people are going to be around.
Arthur asked, they'd love to hear about pushing through when working, when your world or your environment is not conducive to writing.
Oh, it's tough. We have two episodes with uh, a counselor, a psychotherapist named Dennis Palumbo. Episode 99, and there's another episode. The second episode, I don't remember the number, but it's the title of it is like "Writing While the World Is on Fire," which was specifically this past January, which was coming out for the elections, and Los Angeles was burning, and it felt incredibly hard to be thinking about doing meaningful creative work while it just seemed like the world was crashing down around you. And sometimes it's bigger outside factors. Sometimes it's, personal factors. It's, it's your financial situation. It's family. It's illness. There's other reasons why it's hard to do. What I would encourage you to do is to think about let writing be a time where you do have some control in this out of control world or, life situation. Is like, can you take 20 minutes and write a scene and put in your headphones and write a scene and just go off in the corner and do that? You will probably get some stuff done and you'll probably feel a little bit better. And it's just as a let writing be an opportunity to manifest some, order and structure in a place that's otherwise very tough to do. I've had to do some writing during some really difficult family times, and it wasn't always great or pleasant to be doing it. But in the end, I can't tell you. If I were looking back on which pages I wrote during which time, I couldn't tell you what I wrote when. It ultimately is still my writing.
Linnell, let's do two or three more.
Okay. Stacking your projects, what type of workload do you have? Just curious. Is it two specs and one assignment? They're wondering about the workload of a professional writer.
So, writers who are working pretty consistently, I don't tend to write specs. And so if I've written probably 3 specs over the last 10 years, just because I'm generally moving from assignment to assignment, things I pitched to set up versus I wrote from scratch. But generally, I have one first draft that I'm working on at a time, and one. So I'm doing that, and then if I hand that in, then I have a rewrite or some other project I'm going to. Very rarely are 2 things underneath my fingers at the same time. That will happen. There's been situations where I've been on a first draft and a rewrite, and I sort of polish all at the same time, and people just based on the needs of what people needed to do, I was doing all 3 things. But it's not great for your brain to just be shifting back and forth between all these different things. You're not going to get story confused, but there's just a habituation time to sort of put yourself back in the place of what that is and sort of enter into that movie. Like, okay, what do I need to do in this space to make this make sense? So I will rarely do more than one creative project over the course of the day. But as I said earlier, like I'm probably only writing 2 hours of script during the day, but I'm writing other stuff. I'm writing blog posts. I'm writing sort of other sort of initial draft things on stuff. So there's other writing that can be done, even if it's not the all-consuming brain work of screenwriting.
One more question from David Pimentel. He's asking, he's writing and directing an animated movie, and they've screened and tested well, but the main character keeps getting the lowest scores.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the matter for that would be awesome.
Yeah, David, sorry. It's a really common thing, and so hopefully the other people involved in the project understand that it's a really common thing. You're running into the sidekick problem, which is that the sidekicks in movies, especially animated movies, they're just more fun because they're more fun because they don't have the burden of carrying the plot, and so they tend to be. Um, People love them because they're happy and free and get to do things that say crazy stuff. If you have an opportunity to change things till this point, it may be looking for like how can you get some of that sidekick energy into your hero, and are there moments where that hero could actually do a little bit more of that, especially in the very start of the story, so that we're clicking and engaging with them more as not the responsible character, but as the wild character who is a little bit more unpredictable. But what you're running into is super, super common, particularly in animation. And that's just the reality of it. I'm sure if you actually were to test the characters in Inside Out, for example, Joy's character may probably test low because she is responsible for sort of carrying the movie on her shoulders. She's a great character, but I think everyone else probably scores higher in their boxes because they're so jokey. And that's just the difference.
Well, John,
You're getting lots of compliments on Scriptnotes, so if they're all in
Thank
the
you.
chat. And personally, I just wanted to say, I know last year, guys, you all went through the fires in LA. I'm from LA, and so my heart's there, and I hope that you're all pulling through well. It seems like the industry is coming back after such a difficult time.
No, we're in a much better place, but thank you for asking. Yeah, it's improved a lot.
John,
Hey, Mike.
any closing thoughts?
No, this is a great conversation. And so this is honestly, if you enjoyed this, this is the kinds of questions we answer every week on Scriptnotes. So a lot of them are in the book, in the Scriptnotes book, which you can buy now or pre-order now. But yeah, these are all the right questions. It's just it's tough because it's not like there's one way to do anything. But I can hopefully just share sort of my opinion on what works for me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Appreciate you spending your evening with the Northwest Screenwriters Guild. Go to our website, check out our upcoming events. And if you like stuff like this, we are searching for an events coordinator. So show John August a little bit of love here. Thank you, John, for taking the time out of your schedule. Go pre-order Scriptnotes, a book about screenwriting, say it with me, and things that are interesting to screenwriters. Have a good night, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Thank you,
All right, bye.
everybody.